Hello and welcome to the Friday show brought to you by Woodbine. I am the Pollock Report Editor-in-Chief, Natalie Voss, and I'm here today with Kristen Bentley of the Retired Racehorse Project. Before we jump into Thoroughbred Aftercare talk, I just want to remind you that Woodbine offers a new $100,000 guaranteed early pick 5 every weekend. This weekend, you can look forward to a pair of Ontario bred stakes races on the inner turf, the Vice Regent on Saturday, and the Zadracarta on Sunday. First post is 1 p.m. Eastern both days, so horse players, do your homework and get ready. Kristen, welcome to the Friday show.
Thank you so much for having me. Excited to be here.
So I had you on this week because the Makeover released its annual statistics for the participants in this year's edition of the Thoroughbred Makeover event. And I wanted to talk to you a little bit about that. But first, for viewers who aren't familiar with a Thoroughbred Makeover, can you just sort of tell us a little bit about what the event is and how it's evolved through the years?
Yeah, so it started, I think the first year was 2012, and it was a 100-day retraining challenge. And it was just, invitation only, just a handful of trainers to demonstrate how far you could take an off-track racehorse in just 100 days of training. And over the years, it's evolved into the Thoroughbred Makeover we know now, which is a $100,000 retraining competition for horses in their first year of racing, first year of retraining after racing. So horses are only eligible once, so you won't see horses come back year after year. It's just for those guys that are just making that first transition to give them a good foundation and set them up for success. And of course, to demonstrate the athleticism and trainability of these horses and all the cool stuff they can do after racing.
Cool. So one of my favorite parts besides the actual event is the release that you guys have done in recent years, showing us the data behind each year's kind of crop of makeover horses, because it's just so interesting to me. So tell us what kind of data you collect on the participating horses for each year.
Yeah. And that is real team effort. So it takes a bunch of us all working together to get that going. So our, master number cruncher is our executive director, Kirsten Green. But the reason we have all this data is because we've actually built our own proprietary system to collect all of it. So we have our own coder on staff who's, built all these forms and built in all the mechanisms to capture this data. And because it is a competition only open where horses are eligible once, we have a really unique opportunity to grab, like you were saying, that crop data, from 1 year of horses and really take a look at sort of how the trends are changing. So what we do is there's 2 places that we capture all this data. And one is at trainer registration when they sign up with their horses, and then again at final entry. So there is a little bit of attrition between horse registration and final entry, just, with the nature of green horse training. And it's the same thing when horses go to the races too. So it's sort of expected. So we had 516 horses registered for this year's competition, and 377 made it to final entry, which I think is actually our highest retention rate yet. So that's really promising as well.
Cool. And so one of the reasons that I find this so exciting is that there's just not a lot of data out there on off-track thoroughbreds, on aftercare. You sort of know what the nonprofits are funded with every year through the TAA, but it's not very often that you get a chance to sort of look at, what ages horses are coming off the track and what they're doing, what population of horses in terms of their breeding are being successful in those early stages of their new career. What are some of the findings that you guys came up with this year, or trends that you're seeing with the addition of this year's data that you found especially interesting?
Yeah, one thing in particular, and I'm just going to hop over and make sure I can find the right data here because we have tabs and tabs of it. One thing I found particularly interesting is that the average number of starts per horse has gone down slightly, but the average number of earnings per horse has gone up fairly significantly, at least from 2021. So there's a couple ways that, you can always choose to interpret data. And that's kind of the fun thing with statistics, right? Is choosing, what does this show us? So our thesis with that is that, perhaps trainers on the track are choosing to retire horses slightly earlier before they have to drop down the levels, which of course is something that, we're trying to encourage, and get away from that one last race mentality where, you can make a little more money maybe if you drop that horse down and ran it in a lower level, but you also run the risk, of course, of using that horse up. So if that is the way that the numbers are going, that's really encouraging, that trainers might be making the decision to take that horse off the track while it still is very sound and versatile and trainable and ready to go into a new career, before it's, really ground down through the levels. And that's not to say that the war horses, what we call a horse with more than 50 starts, they don't have their place either. I ride a horse that had 38 starts, which is a significant number. And I figured, well, if he was good to go for that, there's not a whole lot I'm going to throw at him that he can't handle too. But of course, the horse is at its most marketable for a second career when it's sound and young with its whole second career ahead of it. So if that is the way that, you can choose to interpret that data, then that's definitely an encouraging trend that we want to continue to see.
Yeah, it's interesting because it also sort of like my reaction when I read that was first like, yeah, maybe that's what's going on. Or maybe this is sort of a sign that like the class of horse and the class of owner who are really interested in that early retirement is sort of maybe focused on the slightly more successful or higher level runner, or I guess not, but so successful, or else they'd be going to a breeding career, but maybe like an owner who's aiming more for allowance graded races rather than claiming. Maybe that's becoming more of a priority within that population, which is good. But you want to see it sort of become the mentality sort of more across the board too. But I guess we don't really know, right?
Yeah, and it's hard to know. I mean, we anecdotally see a lot of stories, of connections that are like, well, we tried 2 or 3 starts. It's not his thing at the allowance level, and we're going to retire him now. Rather they could pass him on and run him in the claimers, and they choose not to do that, which of course, anecdotally, we've heard lots of those stories, and those are great. And those are the stories we want to keep, promoting and sharing, because that's a really good way to give that horse the best chance of success in his second career.
Absolutely. Now, have you seen any sort of change in, I know one of the things that you guys look at is number of starts, and really a horse just has to be eligible. Part of eligibility is either making one start within the guided time frame or posting one recorded workout, so that it sort of allows for horses that were just too slow even when they were working out, or horses that maybe encountered an injury after a workout and were retired after that. Have you seen any sort of change in the proportion of the war horses that have had 50 or more starts versus horses that maybe just came in qualifying just on one workout and didn't even make it to the races? Has that changed over time?
Not much in the past 3 years. I have the past 3-year data in front of me. We're still working on compiling all the data going back to, I believe, 2015 is when we really started to buckle down and gather these numbers. So we still have yet to kind of aggregate all of that. But the past 3-year data, it's kind of held steady. Let me just pull my numbers up. The unraced horses, we had about 8% of the crop in 2020 was unraced, 7% in 2021, and back up to 8% again this year. War horses, it was 7% in 2020, 9% in 2021, and then back down to 7% this year. So I don't know if you can say that's a trend, that as unraced horses go up or down, war horses go the other direction. That may just be a coincidence. And of course, with things happening in 2020 and 2021, you also have to figure in, pandemic related reasons that horses may not have either started or retired or raced longer. Because of course we saw some unusual things happen that year. We assumed a lot more horses were going to be retiring than did. So there's, of course, those external pandemic factors kind of throwing things off a little bit. And it is fascinating. I mean, we're sitting on a ton of data, and it's just now the task of going through it and deciding, where it all goes and what it all means. So
it's exciting to have that information about the horses that qualify just on a workout, because I know that's something that's becoming a little bit more, I think, kind of part of the public consciousness of like, if somebody sees a horse at a sale and then they never see it again, there's really no tracking system in place right now to find out where that horse goes. But if the horse at least made a work and then never turned up anywhere, we know where a small number, at least, of those ended up, because we can show that they ended up in a second home. Would be more helpful to know where more of them ended up. But it's interesting that with that entry requirement or eligibility requirement, that you guys are sort of accidentally a little bit of a net that can catch some of those horses that normally sort of seem to vanish, and we don't know what happens to them.
Yeah. And that, we realize that we're only seeing a very small, section of the population of horses retiring every year. So what we'd like to think is that the trends that we see at the makeover can probably be applied somewhat to all of the horses coming off the track in a year. Because you figure, you've published plenty on this. You figure you've got about 20,000 horses being registered a year. There's some high number of horses theoretically retiring, and only a few hundred make it to the makeover itself. So we can't say like, oh, we've captured the data on every horse that's retired, but we can probably look at these overall trends and, get some idea of where horses are going. And I think that's another thing that makes the makeover unique, is that we're not capturing data just from, traditional aftercare facilities, but we're also capturing data through, direct from connection sales, or, going through the private commercial resellers. So it's a pretty broad look at, the ways that horses leave the track and go on to second careers. So I think we have a pretty unique opportunity that not too many other organizations have, just by nature of what we're doing and how we're doing it. So it does give you a good look at all the ways a horse can happily find his way to retirement.
Definitely. And you do sort of wonder, I would guess the only limitation in kind of extrapolating that data might be that obviously the horses who get entered in the makeover finally are the ones, or like, make it all the way to the makeover, are the ones who were kind of either mentally or physically suitable to turn around in the time frame that they had, which they're allowed, I think, just about a year, a little bit under a year of training. But of course, a lot of people don't start their horses as early as that, because they don't get them as early as that. So there would still be the population who didn't make it to makeover because they needed longer, but who maybe entered the show world later on and became part of the TIP program. So I'm guessing maybe that's sort of the only limitation you guys have as far as translating to the general off-track population, is that these are not dissimilarly, I guess, to like the 2-year-old racehorses. These are the ones who came together to be successful at this moment, and that's why we're seeing them. But as we know, with horses, they develop at different rates and learn new things at different rates. So
right. Yeah, those processes are remarkably similar in that, a lot of factors have to come together for a horse to really be prepared for the makeover. Because, not only is it you're learning a brand new set of skills, but it's also a big show environment. You're in some cases hauling, days to get there. We've got people coming in from California, the Pacific Northwest, and Canada, making the trek to Kentucky. And, it can be a big ask for a horse. So it is actually really not dissimilar from getting horses. Like, are they going to be ready to race at 2, or do they need more time and go to 3? And that's something that we always try to encourage with our trainers. Like, there is no shame if you need to withdraw. Like, we don't see that drop-off rate as a failure. We actually see that, as a good sign that trainers are making good, educated decisions about what they should be doing with their horses. And, the truth of it is that the makeover is not suitable for every horse, and not every horse retiring off the track should aim for the makeover, because some of them need more time or just won't be ready to compete in that kind of environment in 10 months. And that's totally okay. So our hope is that, the makeover itself is, of course, a competition for these 300 some horses and trainers, but it's also meant to serve as an inspiration, for other people to get into a retired thoroughbred and give it a try for themselves. So, and I mean, it works. That's how I got involved. And I know, you got involved last year. Yeah. So it's working. It's encouraging more people to get into thoroughbreds.
Absolutely. Speaking of which, has anything changed about the riders that you were seeing entering the makeover each year? I know that you have sort of shifted it a little bit. I can't remember at what point you did it, but there's now different divisions for junior riders. Professionals and amateurs are competing against each other for the overall title, but are sort of penned separately within those divisions because you have a varied population now. So have you seen any shifts kind of in the riders, especially with the proportion who were amateurs?
We actually haven't seen a lot of change over the years in the breakdown. It's usually about 60% professionals. That might be a little high. And then maybe about a quarter amateurs, and then some juniors. We did add the team option in 2018, and that became like a formal entry option in 2019. It was a pilot program in 2018. So, like you and I could get together and do a horse together, or, everyone from your riding stable could prepare one. We have college teams coming out to do teams. So we've seen, an increase in the team participation to a certain extent. But generally our amateurs are, I would say, like our second biggest population, and the majority is still professionals. But what we've also seen is that I think about 2/3 of our trainers every year recently are new. They're brand new to the makeover, which initially we were like, oh, that's too bad that we're, kind of losing some of our veterans. And then, we pointed out, like, actually, that's a good thing, because that's new people coming in that haven't tried it before, that, are seeing that it's a cool thing to do and a great way to structure your first year of retraining. Because you're not really in it alone. You're in it with, 500 of your best trainer friends. And we have a lot of support systems built into the makeover process. So it is a really nice way to get started with a thoroughbred for the first time. So we like seeing those new numbers every year and those new people that are brand new to the process. And then, of course, we have our veterans to kind of help, collectively guide them all through. So it's a fun mix every year.
Yeah, speaking as one of the amateur riders, it was not something, it was a really good experience, and I'm really glad that we did it. And I'm not really sorry that we don't do it for a second year in a row, because it is kind of a lot.
It's a lot. Yeah.
But if I had sold my horse and was looking for another one, I'd probably do it again. But since I'm just going to have the one active riding horse, that's more the reason than anything else that I'm not entered in the future. And I guess that may be true for other people who decided to not sell their horses at the end, but hang on to them, which is not a bad thing either.
Yeah, I was meant to be like, it was my bucket list lifer, and I was intending to volunteer, and now I work here. So, we always say results not typical, but yeah, I mean, that was kind of my foray into aftercare, was getting involved with the thoroughbred makeover, and now it's my profession. So it's a nice way to be bringing more people into the fold. And I know Jonathan Horowitz, who everyone at Pollock Report is familiar with, he's, working right now to find some people who got into racing because of the makeover. So, it's a mutually beneficial program. We have a lot of race people getting involved with aftercare through the makeover, but it's working both ways as well. So,
sort of final thoughts, what do the numbers that you're seeing this year and the trends that you're seeing year over year sort of tell you about the big picture for this event, or for aftercare in general? It's kind of an obnoxiously broad question, but does it sort of give you a pointer as to what to expect for your organization going forward?
Well, one thing, that we've been focusing on the makeover, it's our banner event. It's certainly not the only thing we focus on. So definitely looking forward, traceability is a big thing that everyone's been talking about in aftercare, because we have all this data about these horses. We have all these horses in our system, but then after they're done with the makeover process, it can be a challenge to kind of keep up with them. So we're really relying on a lot of self-reporting from trainers, but we would love to be able to do more to figure out, where horses go post makeover, what they're doing in second careers. Of course, horses can live to be 20 to 30 years old. So that's many more years of, productive life after the makeover. So that's something that we're always thinking about, is ways to increase the traceability of horses, post makeover, as well as the ones that never made it all the way to final entry. So if they're registered, they stay in our system. So it can be a good way for, connections who are like, hey, whatever happened to, so-and-so, they can always reach out to us, and we can at least get them started. So finding ways to use that data, and of course, combine all that data with the data that everyone else is collecting, our friends at TAA and whatever the Jockey Club is, keeping in their systems. If we can find ways to all work together, I think, we've got a mountain of information, and it's just getting that information to the right people to decide how to use it to improve the welfare for thoroughbreds going forward. Would be key. That's my very broad spectrum answer to your broad spectrum question. But yeah, we're always working on other things other than the makeover. The makeover is the thing that we get the most attention for. But our goal, of course, is to educate another generation of equestrians to keep using thoroughbreds and getting thoroughbreds for second careers. So that's always our driving factor.
Absolutely. Just sort of briefly, you mentioned the Racing Connections having the option to find their horses again. You guys do something that I think is really cool when you get like the final entries in for the makeover, in terms of reaching out to former connections of horses from their racing careers to make sure that they know this is going on and that they can attend if they want to. How do you sort of go about doing that?
Yeah, so we have our breeder postcards go out. This year we called it an entry notification. So if you bred a horse that's in the makeover this year, you will be receiving, if you've not already received, a postcard with your horse's name on it, and where you can expect to find that horse at the makeover. So every breeder of the horse, we work with Equibase and get that sent out. And then this year we're actually adding, it's called the Connections Corner, and it's actually going to be a booth in our vendor fair right by the entrance. So if you're coming into the makeover, you can stop at the Connections Corner and speak with the folks that are going to be manning that booth, and you can find your past horses, and they'll help get you to where you need to go. So you can find the horse's ride times, find his stalls, and go reconnect again.
Well, thank you, Kristen, so much for coming on the Friday show, and remind our viewers what the dates are for the Thoroughbred Makeover here in Lexington in case they want to drop by.
Yes, we'd love to see you at the Kentucky Horse Park, October 12th through 15th. The 15th is our finale day, so that's going to be the top 5 in every discipline come back. That's going to be live streamed as well. So if you can't join us in person, you can watch from home.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, and thanks everyone for watching another edition of the Friday show.
Thank you.